Hi, and welcome back to Making Space to Make. This is week 10, and today we're talking about project tracking and labeling. Previously, we organized our work in progress projects, and I've been seeing a lot of questions about how to track your progress. Should I mark every stage? Do I need an app? How do I remember where I left off? Today, we're talking about project tracking using the Goldilocks principle, which is not too little, not too much, just right. The goal is not to create another system you have to maintain. It's figuring out when tracking is actually helpful versus when it becomes busy work that takes time away from sewing. I think a lot of times we fall into the trap of believing we need complex systems because we see these beautiful, elaborate project management system ads online and telling us that we need to use them to become our best, most productive selves. And we think, I need that. I've personally fallen prey to that line of thinking many times. But here's what I've learned, and you don't need to over-systematize what your eyes can already tell you. You can see if you have not applied interfacing yet. You can see which pattern pieces are cut versus uncut. You can also see basic construction progress. Do you really need to write all that down? Tracking can easily become busy work when you're documenting things that are obvious. If you're spending more time updating your system than actually sewing, that is a red flag. The question to ask yourself is, will I actually look at this information again? If the answer is no, don't bother tracking it. Let me give you some examples of things you probably don't need to track. Whether pieces are cut or uncut, you can see this. Which pieces still need interfacing, you can see and feel this. Basic construction progress. Aside from marking your place in the pattern instructions, you can see what's already been sewn together. Your eyes and hands can give you most of the information you need. If I'm altering a pattern, I write the date, pattern name, the piece name and number, and the cutting info directly on the final pattern pieces. I keep the original pattern pieces if possible, but I discard every pattern piece that came between the original and the final, because that's where confusion happens. What worked and didn't work for future reference, especially if I think I'm going to make the pattern again. And anything I do differently next time falls in here as well. I also track specific technical details I might forget and may find useful for future projects. Things like stitch length and width for bar tacks or top stitching, especially when I'm going between projects. If I nail a particular finish, I want to remember exactly how I did it. For the most part, your work in progress organization system from the previous week handles basic labeling. Everything goes in the same place, pattern pieces stay with projects, and you can see what stage things are at. Sometimes additional simple labeling helps. I use sticky notes in my project bag if I need to remember something specific for when I take the project out again, but will have no use for that information in the future. This way I don't keep a note that could be confusing later on, and I also won't forget to check a notebook before I start sewing. It's right there with my project. As I mentioned last week, for anything I need to see while just glancing at the bag, I write on the back of a sticky note and then put it facing out inside the bag. Anything else can go inside the bag with your project. We do offer downloadable pattern cards for home sewing on our site, which are another option for keeping track of pattern information. These work great if you think you won't check a notebook before you start sewing, since they stay with the pattern pieces at all times. They have space for your measurements, sewing notes, and any changes you made to the pattern pieces, and more. Pattern alterations are where I do get more detailed. When I'm altering patterns, I write directly on the final pattern pieces. I find noting the date and my measurements at the time, in addition to standard pattern information, to be helpful. Once I have the pattern completed, I discard any pattern pieces that were created along the way, so I'm not adding confusion for the next time I decide to sew the garment. If you're worried about not having a record of the alterations process, take photos along the way. I do this especially when I'm developing patterns for work, but even for personal projects, because if I need to step back, I want to see where I'm going back to in reality, not just in my memory, which is often wrong. As far as the format of your notes, there are many options. The easiest way would be to take notes in a good old-fashioned physical notebook. Dot grid, plain, whatever works for you. For those who want digital notes without a lot of bells and whistles, your phone's Notes app can be great. Just create a folder for sewing and off you go. There's also a note-taking app that I like called GoodNotes. I use it for knitting patterns on my iPad. But the key here is you want to pick something that you're actually going to check. If you like digital tracking and note-taking but are looking for something more robust than a simple notes app, Threadloop is a great online option. The major pro here is there's a community aspect where you can see what other people are making and get inspired by their projects. It's a little bit like the old Berta style days, but with better project tracking. Again, the most important thing is choosing something that you'll consistently use. There are times when I do track more carefully. When I'm developing patterns for work, I track everything because I'm writing the sewing instructions, and I know people are going to ask specific questions later on. For really complex personal projects like coats with lots of steps spread over weeks or months, I might keep more detailed notes about what I've completed, what's next, what's been working and what hasn't, especially if there are long breaks between sewing sessions. As far as deciding what to work on next, I keep it really simple. I just put whatever I'm planning to work on next on top of my project drawer unit, so it's handy and available when I finish my current project. Now, for this week's homework, I want you to look at any tracking or labeling systems you currently have. Ask yourself, am I documenting things I can already see? And will I look at this information again? If you don't currently have a tracking system and you feel like you need one, my advice would be to start simple. Choose one format that interests you and you think you'll be able to regularly check in with, and track your next project using that. Don't create a system just because you think you should. Create one because it will genuinely help you sew more or sew better. Remember, the goal of any tracking system is to help you sew more, not create another project to manage. If your system is taking more energy than it's giving back, it's probably a little too much. Next week, we're going to talk about the sewing work triangle, how to arrange your cutting, sewing, and pressing areas for a better workflow. So, trust your eyes, keep it simple, and focus on the sewing. I'll see you back here next Friday.